So let's move on to the next one. The next sutta is called Future Perils number 3. Anguttara 5 is number 79. So these numbers over here, I don't know if you understand these numbers over here. They mean AN is Anguttara Nikaya. These are the numerical discourses. It's one of the large collections of suttas. And 5 means the fifth book. There's 11 books altogether. This is the fifth one, the 5s. And this is the discourse number 79. This is how these numbers work, in case you are not familiar with these numbers. And the name of this sutta, this course, is called Future Perils. So we have more of the same. So I'm going to maybe have a look at this a little bit more briefly. So let's see what happens. Mendicant, these 5 future perils have not currently arisen, but they will arise in the future. You should look out for them and try to give them up. So we should look out for these future perils, and we should try to somehow give it up if we can. What are the 5? In future there will be mendicants who are not developed the physical endurance, ethics, mind and wisdom. So the developing the ethics, mind and wisdom, this means like developing the 3, developing your morality, developing your chitta, this is sila, chitta and panya, and sila bhavita, chitta bhavita, panya bhavita, so you haven't developed these things, and physical endurance, kaya bhavita. I'm not sure if this is the right translation, to be honest. I think kaya here, it's a very interesting Pali word, kaya, which is often translated as body, but it doesn't just mean body, it means the living body specifically, the body, the sentient body, if you like. That's what kaya really means. The body, when it's dead, is called sarira in Pali, and sarira is like a corpse or whatever. It's never called a kaya. So kaya is like a living body. And so when we're talking about very often kaya in the suttas, means like the person basically, because the sentient body, that is what the person is. The person is the sentient body. And so you have not developed your sentient body, actually very often seems to be referring to developing or having sense restraint, not allowing your mind to be taken away by the pleasures of the world, these kind of things. If you look at Majjhima Nikaya 36, the Mahasatchaka Sutta, that's what it seems to be saying in that particular sutta. So you haven't developed sense restraint, you haven't developed ethics, you haven't developed your mind, you haven't developed wisdom. And because you haven't developed any of these things, it means that you haven't really got any insight into the teachings of the Buddha. You don't really understand what the Buddha is talking about. Even if you have heard the teachings, you have no personal experience with them. And it's because you have no personal experience with them, this is what happens. They will ordain others, but be unable to guide them in the higher ethics, the higher mind and the higher wisdom. You won't be able to because you haven't got that personal experience. You may know the teachings, the Dhamma, but you don't really fully understand what they are about. And then those, in turn, they too will not develop their sense restraint, their ethics, mind and wisdom. They too will ordain others but be unable to guide them in the higher ethics, mind and wisdom. They too will not develop their sense restraint, ethics, mind and wisdom. So you can see it kind of carries on from generation to generation. Once you lose that ability and the insight into the Dhamma, understanding through personal experience what these things mean, then it kind of carries on, and there is a loss there somewhere along the line, and actually things stop because of that. And so this shows you in a way how important it is to have people who practice these teachings properly so as to realize these results. It is when we have the results of the practice together with the Dhamma, the two things coming together, that's when we have a very powerful Dhamma in the world, because the living experience combined with the teaching of the Buddha is really what we should be looking for. That is when the Dhamma is still alive. Once the living experience is gone, there's a big chance you will not understand the teachings correctly, you start misinterpret them, you start coming up with strange ideas, and then it is really problematic. You cannot teach others properly, and the Dhamma gets lost in that way. So that is how corrupt training comes from corrupt teachings, and corrupt teachings come from corrupt training. This is the first future peril that has not currently arisen, but will arise in the future. Because you haven't trained yourself properly, you don't understand the teaching. Yeah, that's the corrupt training. You cannot teach the others. That's the corrupt teaching. And then they get corrupt teaching, you have more corrupt training and corrupt teaching, and goes on and on like that. Furthermore, in future time there will be mendicants who have not developed the sense-restraint, ethics, mind and wisdom. They will give dependence to others, but be unable to guide them in the higher ethics, mind and wisdom. They too will not develop their sense-restraint, ethics, mind and wisdom. They too will give dependence to others, but be unable to guide them in the higher ethics, mind and wisdom. They too will not develop their sense-restraint, ethics, mind and wisdom. So this is the same as the previous one. The only difference is the previous one you had ordination, here you have dependence. This is just a slight difference, a monastic difference. It has to do with how you relate to teachers and your the person who ordains you, your preceptor. So it's the difference between teacher and preceptor. So there's no real significance there. So I'll just move straight on to the next one. And that is how corrupt training comes from corrupt teachings come from corrupt training. This is the second future peril that has not currently arisen, but will arise in the future. Furthermore, in a future time there will be mendicants who have not developed their sense-restraint, ethics, mind and wisdom. Yeah, so the same thing again and again. The danger of not developing the path is kind of going through here all the time. Has many, many bad consequences. In discussion about the teaching and elaborations, they fall into dark ideas without realizing it. So the discussion about the teaching here is the Abhidhamma Kata, elaborations Vedalla Kata. Abhidhamma here does not mean the Abhidhamma, it means about the teaching. This is the earliest use of the word Abhidhamma in the suttas. It means concerning the teaching or about the teaching. It doesn't refer to the Abhidhamma Pitaka, which arose much later. So when you discuss these teachings and the elaboration is like Vedalla. This is something you see in the suttas in the Majjhima Nikaya. They're called Vedalla suttas. They are like elaborations or questions and answers and these kind of thing. Yeah. So because you haven't trained, because you haven't actually realized these teachings in any way, you don't understand. You fall into Kanha Dhamma. Kanha is dark or black. Dhamma is teaching. You fall into a dark teaching, if you like. Yeah, and you don't even know that. You think that you're teaching the right thing, when actually it is a dark teaching. And you start saying things that are completely against what the Buddha taught. Now this is very dangerous. But you can see this happening all the time. This happens in all kinds of discussions, for example, about things like right view. What is right view? What is required? Rebirth. Do we need to believe in rebirth or not? Or is rebirth just an ancient superstition? These kind of things. Samadhi. How important is samadhi on the Buddhist path? What is the meaning of nibbana? What does it actually mean? The more profound the teachings are in the suttas, the more likely you will fall into dark ideas, because they are precisely profound and they are difficult to really relate to very often. And so this is the danger. So we need the people. We need those gems in the world, those great beings. I remember the Leviathan and the Leviathan gulpers. Yeah, we need those Leviathan gulpers. And if we haven't got them already, we need to create them. Yeah, so we have to become those Leviathan gulpers. Do we have any potential Leviathan gulpers here? Or if you're not Leviathan gulpers, maybe just Leviathans. Venerables, are you? Yes, we have over there. Okay, good. Wow, that is really can-do attitude. I like that can-do attitude. That's wonderful. That's really great. So so we have to do these things. We have to get there. This is why we need these great beings, the great Nagas in the world, because they ensure that we don't fall into these dark ideas which block the path, block the ability of ourselves and others to actually realize these teachings. Happens so easily, and it's very confusing when we see all the discrepancies in the world between the various kind of ideas. Okay, there was supposed to be a break. Please tell me off, Bobby, if I get the schedule wrong, because I find it hard sometimes to find my place in the schedule. There was supposed to be a break after the last session. No, okay, never mind. We'll just do it after this session instead. So, sorry about that. Things are always exciting and uncertain. So that is how the corrupt training comes from corrupt teachings, and corrupt teachings come from corrupt training. This is the third future peril that has not currently arisen, but will arise in the future. And now comes my favorite one, which I also often quote on these retreats. Furthermore, in the future time, there will be mendicants who have not developed their sense restraint, their ethics, mind, and wisdom. When discourse is spoken by the Buddha, deep, profound, transcendent, dealing with emptiness, are being recited, they don't want to listen. They won't actively listen or try to understand, nor will they think that those teachings are worth learning and memorizing. I find this very fascinating. Yeah, this is very, very interesting, and this is a kind of where the world often finds itself. So the discourse is spoken by the Buddha that are deep, gambira. I think it's gambira, profound. What other words here? Gambira. Say again, please. Gambira and gambiratta. Okay, so they are profound and they have a profound meaning. Atta is the meaning here. Yeah, so profound with a profound meaning. Transcendent, lokuttara. Lokuttara means literally beyond the world. Dealing with emptiness. Sunyata patisangyutta. Is that right? Sunyata patisangyutta. Yeah, so so this is kind of the word of the Buddha. It is profound. And because it is profound, it is often not easy to understand. It takes an interest, it takes an inclination of the mind to want to understand what the Buddha is talking about. It goes beyond the world. Most people are interested in what is in the world. We want to deal with our ordinary problems. We don't want to know about what's beyond the world. We don't know anything about that anyway. Who cares about what's beyond the world? Right? Wrong. Just testing you, to see if you are awake or not. So, you, of course, that is interesting because we know the limitations of the world. The world just isn't that interesting. The world is just more of the same. There is no solution in the world. It just goes round and round. Since, of course, if something goes beyond the world, if it is liberating beyond that, if it gives a profound happiness, way beyond ordinary happinesses, we can eliminate the suffering on the world. If it really is transcendent, that's marvelous. It's wonderful. The idea of elevating the mind to something way beyond the ordinary, to a bliss, a sense of peace, a sense of freedom outside of the ordinary, there's something very, very attractive about that if we understand the suffering of ordinary life. So transcendence is wonderful. Instead of always focusing on this world is just not all that interesting. And yet there is a tendency for people to want to focus on this world and not really wanting to know about that which lies beyond, which is truly profound, truly has a profound meaning. And the way that is defined in the ultimate way is that it deals with emptiness. Sunyata patisangyutta. Patisangyutta means connected with, dealing with. Sunyata is emptiness. And in the Pali tradition and in Theravada Buddhism, the idea of sunyata is just another way of talking about non-self. This is why it is so profound. This is why it is so hard for most people to deal with. But this is the thing that makes something Buddhist. This is what kind of makes Buddhism stand out in the world religions, world philosophies, is the idea of emptiness. You don't find it anywhere else in the same way as you find it in the Buddhist suttas. This is kind of what makes Buddhism Buddhism, the idea of emptiness. And that is across the board, whether it's Mahayana Buddhism or Theravada Buddhism. Sunyata is there everywhere. This is what we're looking for. This is the real thing. But people don't want to listen to those things. Why? Well, because it is maybe they just want to find ways of dealing with their ordinary problems, or find ways of being a bit more happy in the present life, using the Dhamma to kind of have better relationships and to enjoy the movies more because you're more mindful when you go to the movies. Something like that, yeah. And of course, it is not very profound, not all that useful. And so you're not all that interested when you hear the profound Dhamma of the Buddha. And this is very, very problematic. So you don't really listen. You don't try to understand. You're not really interested. When the Dhamma is being spoken, you fiddle with your mobile phone at the time when the Dhamma is being spoken. No, I didn't mean Ni Wern when I was saying that, because I know he's doing Dhamma. I know he's doing Dhamma things. I didn't mean that. But it's interesting. Sometimes you give Dhamma talks and you see people are so restless that they can't just listen. They have to deal and fiddle with something else. Yeah, and it's kind of a lost opportunity. I remember many years ago, it was in Singapore, many years ago, and I was giving a Vesak talk in Singapore, and they decided, well, for Vesak, let's do it, kind of bring all the religions together so that, we have this really nice talk and everyone can listen to the Dhamma together. So they brought in all the various kind of religions, and then it said to me, okay, now talk to everyone. I said, yes, sir, and so I started talking. And I realized very quickly that these other religions, they weren't interested in Buddhism. Yeah? They had come because they were invited, but they were kind of, mobile phone again, clicking away. And it's so hard to talk to a crowd when people are not interested, because you feel like, what's the point of talking anyway, You want to kind of inspire people and say something nice, and everyone is like, whatever, I couldn't care less about what you're talking about. And it's a lost opportunity for the speaker, but also for the crowd. They're not interested. They have no idea that what is being said actually might be life-changing, might be very interesting. Might be, maybe I should be a Buddhist. Maybe that's a good idea. Instead of being a atheist or whatever, or a so-called free thinker. People call themselves free thinkers. That's conceit, There is no free thinking. All thinking is conditioned, So this is kind of a conceit in the first place. So when people tell me, I'm a free thinker, I think, no, you're not a free thinker at all. That's just your conceit. I think that you're a free thinker. There's no such thing as free thinking. Everything is conditioned thinking. You are a conditioned thinker. And they look at me, oh, yeah. This is kind of one of these ideas that if you are religious, you are somehow trapped, but if you're not religious, then you are free. But actually, no, you're just as trapped, even if you're not religious or whatever. It's all the same. Everyone is trapped. You guys are also trapped, right? You are trapped by the Buddhist teaching. But the question is not whether you are trapped or not. The question is it a good trap? That is the question. So we have to check out the different traps and find the best one and go for the good trap. Just like we go for the good brainwashing, then you are on the right track. That's kind of the idea here. And so this ability to understand when something is profound, when something is truly meaningful, this is a very important ability to be able to distinguish these things. And then when you really understand that, then to pay heed, then to listen, then to take an interest. Wow, okay, let me listen to this. This is so important. This matters for my life. This is far more interesting than winning the lottery, $1 million in the lottery. Who cares about $1 million? This is much more important than that. One word from the Buddha is worth 1,000 times winning the lottery and $1 million. How many people think like that? Almost nobody, right? They would rather win that blooming lottery rather than anything else. Okay, so 100 times 20 million. That's when it kind of starts to matter. You're right. Okay, so whatever it is. Yeah, this kind of. Yeah. So this is the problem, and so then we have the opposite. Yeah, but when discourse is composed by poets, poetry with fancy words and phrases, composed by outsiders or spoken by disciples, when they are being recited, they will want to listen. They will actively listen and try to understand, and they'll think those teachings are worth learning and memorizing. Yeah, this is such a common thing in the world. You hear everyone, they kind of want to read something beautiful, oh yeah, this novel is so nice, it is written so nicely. Or very often you will read a Dhamma book, not the teaching of the Buddha, but some Dhamma book by some teacher, because, oh wow, they are so clever, they put the words together in such a beautiful way, yeah, they make it sound so nice, wow, it really sings to my heart, how wonderful it is. And then the word of the Buddha, wow, so dry, yeah, wow, boring, yeah, repetitive all the time, wow, I can't stand it. I would rather read the book of this one and that one and this one, that much more fun. But that's kind of missing the point. If you really try to understand what many of these teachers are saying in the books, it's actually often very difficult to really understand what they are saying. It may sound beautiful on the surface, but when you try to figure out what they're saying, actually you can't really figure it out because it's kind of ambiguous. It is uncertain. It is coming from maybe wrong view. It has all of these difficulties with it. And the word of the Buddha, even though it may look boring on the surface, once you start to get into it, it is very precise. You can understand what actually is going on. Yeah, this actually is spoken in a way that makes sense. It is coherent. It is complete. It has all the bits and pieces, which very often you don't find otherwise. And so I would say, if you're going to read something that actually, what is really easy to read, the suttas are ultimately far easier than much of the other things that you find in the world. So this is, instead of reading the fancy words of poets with fancy phrases, composed by outsiders, I always kind of find it really, you hear about people reading all kind of things except the suttas, the kind of Rumi and all of these kind of sages of other religions who have very different ideas. And some of those things occasionally can be interesting, but that should not be the mainstay of what you're doing. Spoken by disciples, Who are disciples? Well, everyone who is not the Buddha is basically a disciple. And so it is always lesser than the word of the Buddha. All of these things, can be problematic. It doesn't mean that we never read these things, that we take no interest in these things, but it means that we know what is the priority. We know what is most important. We know where to go to gain the final word on what Buddhism is. That is what we understand. And this is what this really is about. The final word on what Buddhism is comes from the Buddha, not from disciples or from outsiders. Outsiders means someone who is not a Buddhist. That's what it basically means. And so we listen to the word of the Buddha. That is the main root of our understanding, what informs our understanding of everything else within the Buddhist teachings. So please keep this in mind, and this is one of the reasons why I like to use suttas as the foundation for these kind of little retreats, these little workshops that we have together, because it gives us access to the most pure form of what the Dhamma is about, the Buddhist teachings are about, and this is kind of why I enjoy this. And who is the person who taught me to do this? Ajahn Brahm. In the old days, Ajahn Brahm read a lot of suttas. He taught suttas at Bodhinyana Monastery. He would quote suttas left, right, and center. He doesn't do it so much anymore, but he used to do that all the time. And even today, if you ask him, he will tell you that the word of the Buddha is the most important in Buddhism. So I learned that from Ajahn Brahm, and I am very grateful that he taught me to read the suttas in that way. So this is the Dhamma, the foundation for everything else. If you want to know what someone is saying, you should refer it to the suttas, and only then should you understand it in that light, in light of the suttas. Okay, anyway, so let us move on now. That is how corrupt training comes from corrupt teachings, and how corrupt teachings come from corrupt training. This is the fourth future peril that has not currently arisen, but will arise in the future. Sandoso, corrupt, yeah. Sandoso, like dosa. Same as dosa, sandosa. It's dosa with sun in front. Sandosa. Okay, not sentosa, but sandosa. Okay. So, yeah. Okay, let's go on to the last one. Furthermore, in a future time, there will be mendicants again who have not developed sense restraint, ethics, the mind, and wisdom. The senior mendicants will be indulgent and slack, leaders in backsliding, neglecting seclusion, not rousing energy for attaining the unattained, achieving the unachieved, and realizing the unrealized. That's bad news. So, when the senior mendicants are the leaders in backsliding, well, the junior mendicants become the next leaders in backsliding, just behind them, following along the bad example. So you can see why this is problematic. So, what was that? Those who come after them will follow their example. They too will become indulgent and slack, leaders in backsliding, neglecting seclusion, not rousing energy for attaining the unattained, achieving the unachieved, and realizing the unrealized. We tend to take after the people before us. And if the leaders are a bad example, then the disciples also will follow along in that way. So as leaders, it is very important to do the right thing. Not just to say the right words, but to act in the right way. As you act, so you speak. As you speak, so you act. That is one of the hallmarks of the Buddha, that sense of integrity in the way he speaks and acts. That is how corrupt training comes from corrupt teachings, and corrupt teachings come from corrupt training. This is the fifth future peril that has not currently arisen, but will arise in the future. Actually, we are now in the future. That's true, we are in the future. Whoa. So, what? Backsliding, exactly. So this is kind of the point, right? We now live at the future time compared to this. And so we can expect that many of these things have happened, and of course they have happened. If you look around the Buddhist world, you see a lot of these things happening in the Buddhist world. You see a lot of dark Dhamma. You see a lot of teachers who teach their students in the wrong way. You see a lot of people being interested in all kinds of things that has got nothing to do with the teaching of the Buddha. And you do see a lot of backsliding. You see a lot of people who live indulgent life, who are not leaders in seclusion, who prefer to live in seclusion. It is very common. So all of these things have happened. We are now in that future. And of course, even though we are in the future, it is likely to get even worse, because things tend to decline slowly. And so if we are aware of these things, we can hopefully halt it a little bit. And you can see, if you look at the history of Buddhism, it's a little bit like that. Yeah, it goes down, and then there's like a little bit of a renaissance, maybe some very charismatic monk or maybe nun arises, and they kind of lift up the Sangha for a while. In Thailand, you had like Ajahn, for example, who then was kind of reinvigorated the forest tradition in Thailand, that then became very strong, and you had a lot of famous teachers coming out of that. So then it goes better for a while, and then it starts declining again. Yeah, it goes better and then declining. But the general trend is downwards. The general trend is for things to get worse and worse. And so very useful to be aware of these things, so we can see it happening, and then we can take precautions to stop these things from actually getting even worse than they are already. So, let's have another 5-minute break and do some meditation or whatever you would like to do.
Hi Ajahn.
Hi.
I am one of those guilty of reading more Dharma books than suttas. Although I actually did buy the whole set of Bhikkhu Bodhi suttas. They are just sitting there. It looks really daunting if you have like all the volumes. I mean, I'm just wondering, how would you advise? I mean, are we supposed to read every single one of them, like from in sequence, or what do you do? Actually, I tried doing that, but I always fail. You know, I haven't covered all. You know, I always try to read and tick off, but I never finish. So what would you? I mean, it's not easy to read. I mean, that's one of the things I face. But now we have it's also time to promote. BGF has a sutta discussion on Sundays.
Okay.
Every Sunday, and I found it so helpful.
Good.
Because when you have discussion,
excellent,
the sutta comes alive. You know, so it has more meaning for us. You see, when we discuss. So, but when I read it at home, it's like flat sometimes, you know. It's like sometimes you don't understand and you can't talk to anyone about it. So what would you advise? Sure.
So a sutta discussion is great. So go to the sutta discussion and then presumably you know which sutta is going to be discussed beforehand. Do you? No, you don't know beforehand. Okay. Well, if you know beforehand, you can read it beforehand, and then you can get the contrast between your reading and the reading in the group and see how that differs and see kind of how that enriches your understanding of things. So that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it, if it's too boring, is to listen to sutta readings. Like what we're doing now, basically, is like sutta readings and sutta explanations. And we do these things in Perth all the time. So if you go to the BSWA website, lots of sutta readings and lots of, I think that, I don't know, I do some of those. So I think they're quite good quality, That's what I reckon. So try that, because listening to someone else explaining is a very different thing. Not just me, but many other people also do this kind of sutta readings. Ajahn Brahm sometimes do it. Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi does it. So depending on different styles that you like. Then you can read the suttas that are more inspirational. Dhammapada is a great place to start. Read some of the verses Dhammapada every time at night before you go to sleep. Take out the Dhammapada and read a few verses. And it's very beautiful and inspiring verses in the Dhammapada. Take some of the things like the Theragata and Theragata, also very nice to read a little bit. Another thing which is nice to read is the Samyutta Nikaya, the first book of the Samyutta Nikaya. These are the suttas on devatas, on the gods coming to visit the Buddha. Also very inspiring and very interesting. They're just verses basically, and they have a kind of inspirational quality to them. The Majjhima Nikaya is also nice because the Majjhima Nikaya has kind of very complete suttas. So you have a sutta where the Buddha kind of gives a complete teaching in a framework, talks a little bit about the Buddha, about the connection to the people around him and these kind of things. So it has a sense of completeness about it, which is very inspiring. The way I would read the Majjhima Nikaya is, if something in the beginning there is a quick little introduction to each sutta, it explains what it is about. So go there first of all, see if it is a sutta that might be interesting to you. And if it is not interesting, skip it. If number 2 is not interesting, skip that one. If number 3 is not interesting, skip that. Even if there's only one sutta in the entire collection that is interesting to you, read that one. Some of them are very simple suttas, actually very easy to understand. Some of them are quite entertaining because they have kind of all kind of things happening and going on in that sutta. Some of them some of them will touch you in a deep way because you feel that there's something going on that is kind of really, that actually inspires you. So it varies a lot. Go to the one you like, don't read the ones. If you start reading and think, oh, this is really boring, skip it straight away. That's what I recommend. And then gradually, in this way, you learn how to read the suttas. And if you never really do enjoy it, don't read it. Because if you don't enjoy it, it just destroys your appetite and interest in the Dhamma. That's what I recommend.
Ajahn, it's supposed to be a 15-minute break now for participants.
Say again?
It's tea break.
Tea break, shall we finish the Q&A first, or should we tea break first?
I was told tea break.
Tea break first, is it? Q&A first. Okay. Okay. Q&A first. Okay. So the different opinions. So we have another 5 minutes of Q&A, and then we can have a tea break.
Hi, Ajahn. Thank you for the teachings here today. I really appreciate it. I wanted to go back to the question of karma and rebirth and what you were saying about not all negative events, like say, cancer in a young person, can be related to bad karma, but rather sort of random chaos that exists in this planet. And so my question in relation to that is suffering just cyclical in nature, as opposed to there being the potential of a linear progression in our collective evolution as we begin to become better and better? Is there no hope or potential for transcendence where on this realm things actually get better?
There is. Things do get better. So they can. So if you look at the human history of the past 2,500 years, and many things have got better. We don't die of some of the things people died of 2,500 years ago. We don't die of anymore. We have gotten better as better doctors now than we probably had. People don't die of kind of stupid things like they used to die of. If someone breaks a leg, you know how to fix it up properly again. Yes, it can get better. But what happens is that you get reborn according to your karma. So if the human realm gets better, that may mean that you need more good karma to get reborn in the human realm. So it's harder to enter that human realm, because you need more good karma. So maybe you don't make it to the human realm. Maybe you get reborn as a mosquito instead. That's the problem, right? So the karma you require is still the same to get reborn. Or if it's a very nice human realm, you need more good karma. And so, yes, the world can become better, but the beings where they get reborn still depends entirely on the karma and how they live your life. That is ultimately the thing that decides these things. I'm not sure if that's what your question, but that's my answer. So you can try again if you like.
I think I was just thinking also. And I do get your answer, and I appreciate that perspective. I was thinking more so in terms of this realm in itself, and whether there is collective positive evolution.
There is like for the realm itself, there can be collective positive evolution, but usually it goes in cycles. So there is like a collective positive evolution for a while, and then it kind of goes in reverse, and it's collective, negative evolution for a while, and then it goes kind of in cycles like this. You see this is actually even mentioned in the suttas. This is in the what's it called again now, the Tatiyaanāgatabhayasutta, I think it is. Sutta. So the lions roar on the the wheel-turning monarch. And there it talks about the world kind of going through these long evolutions. Human lifespan, it goes longer and longer and longer, and it goes up to 80,000 years. That's kind of interesting. And then it starts to go down again. It goes down to 10 years. So kind of it's like human lifespan oscillates between these enormous kind of short and to become very, very long. So there is evolution in a sense, but in the end it doesn't really make much difference for us as individuals, because for us as individuals, where we get reborn depends on our personal karma, and doesn't really matter what's happening in the bigger scheme of things.
So just don't worry about it.
Be kind. Worry about being kind. That's kind of what matters.
Ajahn, just like to gain clarity about these 5 future perils. They are already 2, 2nd and 3rd. Because the ending of this sutta say you should look up for them and try to give them up. So my question is, in this current era, we know that we are in this era of the future here. A lot of things that we are facing here already happen in the reality. And even more so, sometimes happen in our own family or relative. So do we look up for them and give them out? And it's a balance between giving up or eliminate or reducing. And this sometimes also become a burden and responsibility of we want to help them to also see more, learn more, so that we don't continue the corrupt teaching or corrupt training.
Yeah. Well, I must admit, I think a lot of this also falls on the monastics, yeah, because what we're talking about here is, high degrees of training and teaching the next generation. I think this is certainly relates to monastics. It does probably relate to lay people as well to some extent, but certainly it's very important for monasticism, because generally monasticism is kind of the cutting edge, if you like, or the kind of leading edge of Buddhism. Usually, that's where the kind of the monastics are the ones who keep the teaching alive and bring it forward and these kind of things. But yes, it is. I think lay people too should be doing these things. And basically, what it means in that case, it means that you should practice the teaching to the best of your ability. You should practice those ethics. You should have that sense restraint. You should develop the mind. And as you do that, then you are minimizing the corruption of these teachings. I think that's kind of the main message here. Yeah, the problem arises because people don't practice the path properly. So if you want to teach your children, to live well, you have to don't just tell them. You have to live like you teach. Otherwise, it doesn't have any effect. And so, to that extent, it is also true. Yeah. Okay, so I think everyone seems to be ready for a cup of tea. I get the impression. So, or coffee or whatever. So let's have a 15-minute break, and we'll see you back 4:15.